I want you to visualize a very specific mundane moment.
Okay.
You're sitting on your couch, maybe the day is finally winding down, and you're just, scrolling through your phone.
Right, the nightly ritual.
Exactly. You're swiping past the usual mixed videos, articles, maybe a few spicy takes, some industry news, and suddenly you feel it.
That feeling.
Yes. But it's not anger. It isn't outrage or even annoyance, really. It's just this very quiet, undefined sense of hesitation.
Like a tiny, almost imperceptible uneasiness about the words popping up on the screen.
Yeah, exactly that. You can't quite put your finger on why, but something about the tone of the internet just feels well off.
Right.
Has that happened to you recently? Because if it has, you're absolutely not alone. Today, we're dedicating our entire deep dive to exploring exactly what that feeling is.
Where it comes from.
Yeah, and what it says about this specific era we're living in.
It's a feeling that is, frankly, incredibly pervasive right now, yet almost nobody is actually putting it into words.
I mean, we usually focus on the loud emotions, right?
Exactly. The loud emotions the internet tries to pull out of us. The absolute joy, the fury, the profound shock.
The stuff that gets the clicks.
Right. We spend so much time dissecting those extremes that we completely ignore the quiet, persistent background hum of discomfort that accompanies almost everything we read online.
Which brings us to the focal point of our deep dive today. We're looking at a deeply compelling spoken reflection by Tommy Yoshida, also known in Japan as Tsutomu Yoshida.
A fascinating thinker.
Really fascinating. The piece is titled A Small Uneasiness When Watching Online Posts. And what makes this so relevant, I think, is that it's part of a broader series of notes he's been working on called AI as a Transitional Phase.
That framing alone is worth pausing on.
Right.
Calling this a transitional phase implies we are actively in the messy middle of a profound shift.
We're not at the beginning anymore.
No, we're no longer in the legacy era of the internet. But with artificial intelligence rapidly reshaping how information is generated and consumed, we haven't quite arrived at whatever the final destination is going to be either.
And because we are navigating that messy middle, we need to set a few ground rules for our deep dive today, drawing directly from Yoshida's own parameters.
Ground rules are important here.
Crucial. First, our mission here isn't to evaluate whether AI is inherently good or bad.
We aren't here to give you a tutorial on the latest tech tools either.
Exactly. And most importantly, we are not here to reach any firm, locked-in conclusions. The entire ethos of Yoshida's reflection is about giving ourselves permission to just sit with unfinished thoughts.
Allowing questions to remain paused.
Yes. You can't slam the book shut on these ideas when society is still actively writing the chapter.
And that is a rare luxury today. We are so heavily conditioned to demand immediate answers.
Hot takes.
Hot takes, ultimate solutions. But observing a changing era without having to immediately judge it or optimize it is often where the real insight lives.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with one of the most fascinating stylistic choices Yoshida made in the source material itself.
Oh, the audio recording.
Yes. He actually recorded this reflection in English, and he intentionally chose to preserve parts of the audio that might sound unnatural or slightly uncomfortable to a native speaker.
He didn't edit it out.
He didn't polish away the friction at all. He left that linguistic discomfort intact on purpose.
Which is a profound choice when you consider the overarching theme of AI. Right now, we have endless tools that will instantly smooth out our language,
correct our grammar,
polish our thoughts until they are perfectly frictionless.
They sound like everyone else.
Exactly. By leaving those slight awkwardnesses in place, Yoshida is putting a magnifying glass on the friction between human language, rapidly advancing technology, and human judgment.
It forces you, the listener, to slow down.
Right. You can't just passively consume the word.
You have to actively engage with them and feel that slight human resistance.
And it perfectly mirrors the core disconnect he is observing online.
The certainty aspect.
Yes. Yoshida points out that when you look at ordinary everyday posts, just standard videos or articles in your feed, the words used sound incredibly certain.
Everything is presented as absolutely definitive.
Right. It's never, I think this might work.
It's, this is the only way to do things, or this is the absolute truth.
But he notices that this extreme surface-level certainty feels slightly hollow.
And he isn't launching a heavy criticism here, which I love.
No, he isn't angry.
It's just that quiet hesitation we talked about at the start, a feeling of, wait, are we really this certain about everything?
What's fascinating here is how that absolute certainty is actually an illusion created and now hyper-accelerated by the medium itself.
Internet algorithm.
The algorithmic internet does not reward nuance.
Ow.
It doesn't reward maybe or perhaps. It rewards absolute conviction because absolute conviction drives engagement.
It makes you click.
But human beings are inherently creatures of nuance, doubt, and context.
We live in the gray area.
We do. So when we are constantly bombarded with language that insists on 100% certainty, our subconscious flags it. Our brains whisper, this doesn't match reality.
And when you bring AI into the mix, language models that are trained on this exact, definitive, highly confident internet data,
They regurgitate that same absolute certainty.
even when they're hallucinating.
Exactly. That disconnect between human nuance and manufactured certainty is exactly where Yoshida's small uneasiness takes root.
That leads us perfectly into his primary metaphor, which I guarantee is going to resonate with you if you have spent any time on a video platform recently.
The doorway in the room.
Yes. He compares this phenomenon to a doorway in a room, specifically using video thumbnails and titles as his example.
We have all seen this.
Oh, everywhere. The thumbnail, the entrance to the content is extreme. It's neon, it features intense, dramatic text.
Maybe a creator looking absolutely horrified.
Or ecstatic. Hands on their face, mouth wide open. It practically screams at you. It sets the expectation that what you're about to experience is going to be explosive.
Life-altering.
Deeply dramatic.
You're bracing yourself for an emotional hurricane based entirely on the forecast of that thumbnail.
Just preparing your nervous system for something intense just to click the link.
But then what actually happens when you click?
Right. You walk through the doorway and you're inside the room. And the reality of the content itself is surprisingly anticlimactic.
The person speaking in the video is actually quite reasonable.
They're just sitting there talking. The points they are making simply make sense.
The room is quiet, thoughtful, and mundane.
But the doorway leading into it was painted neon and covered in flashing warning signs.
Right.
Think about what stands out to you when you hit those extreme doorways leading to quiet rooms. Because for Yoshida, the gap between the entrance and the room isn't just a quirk of marketing.
No, it's not.
It's a profound shift in how we package human thought.
And the psychological toll of living with that constant gap is enormous. Imagine walking down your physical street and outside every single shop, there is a person screaming through a megaphone.
Just yelling that you must come inside right now or your life will be ruined.
Exactly. But then you walk into the bakery and it's just a quiet person kneading dough, softly offering you a croissant.
That's such a great way to picture it. The sheer cognitive dissonance of that daily experience would be exhausting.
You would eventually become entirely numb to the megaphone.
You'd be constantly on edge, but you'd also completely lose trust in the storefronts themselves.
The packaging completely loses its meaning.
Precisely, and that's what we are experiencing digitally. Yoshida's metaphor of the small distance between the doorway and the room inside captures this perfectly.
We are constantly navigating this emotional whiplash. The entrance demands your panicked, undivided attention, but the room itself only asks for mild curiosity.
It trains us to distrust the packaging of information entirely.
And again, as we transition into an AI-driven era, we're seeing algorithms not just sorting these doorways, but actively generating them.
Generating the thumbnails, writing the titles.
We are training machines to build the most manipulative megaphones possible, simply to lead humans into very ordinary rooms.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Yoshida doesn't just stop at how the information is packaged.
Right, he goes deeper.
He takes it a step further and looks at how the information is actually valued once it's out there. He makes this striking observation that the value of a statement today is no longer determined by the person speaking.
Which is a massive, fundamental shift in human communication.
It really is.
For centuries, the weight of words rested firmly on the shoulders of the speaker. If you stood in a town square and made a claim, your personal reputation gave it weight.
Your lived expertise.
Your own conviction. You owned your speech, and you bore the consequences of it.
But Yoshida points out that today, that responsibility has completely shifted outward. The value of what is said is almost entirely dictated by audience reactions.
It's outsourced to the metrics.
The likes, the shares, the retweets.
The dwell time.
And honestly, the amount of outrage a statement can generate. A speaker says something, but they instantly surrender the weight of those words to the crowd. And frankly, to the algorithms mediating that crowd.
It's the ultimate outsourcing of value. When we exist in a society where a speaker relinquishes the responsibility of their own speech to the whims of the crowd, we lose the anchor of truth.
Because it's not about accuracy anymore.
No, The value of a thought is no longer based on whether it is accurate, deeply considered, or carefully articulated. Its value is purely based on its velocity
How fast it can travel across a network.
and how many reactions it can harvest along the way. It turns every statement into a product waiting to be appraised by an often anonymous, highly reactive mob.
And in this transitional phase, AI recommendation engines act as the ultimate arbiters of that value.
They decide what gets velocity.
The crowd reacts, but the machine curates the crowd's reaction, reinforcing this cycle where words only matter if they trigger an algorithmic response.
It's a closed loop.
When you lay it all out, like the extreme clickbait doorways, the outsourced value of our words, the algorithm chasing velocity, it's incredibly easy to assume that everything is just terrible and rapidly devolving.
It sounds pretty bleak.
It does. But Yoshida throws a massive curveball here. It's one of the most surprising insights in his entire reflection.
Oh, about the internet improving.
Yes. He explicitly states that he does not believe the internet is declining. In fact, he feels that compared to the early days of the web, the internet is actually becoming much more organized.
Wait, hold on. More organized? Because if I open almost any social feed right now, it feels like stepping into a highly orchestrated dumpster fire. How is he possibly justifying the idea that this is an improvement?
I had the exact same reaction, but he grounds this in historical context. Think back to the early days of the web.
The Wild West.
The true Wild West era of the internet. We're talking anonymous message boards, completely unregulated chat rooms.
Those awful neon-colored personal web pages.
With zero rules and no expectations for behavior, it was genuinely chaotic. The internet was treated as a completely separate universe from the physical world.
A place where you could be anyone and say anything with zero real-world friction.
But Yoshida observes that today, offline values are actively entering the online space. We talk so much more about concepts like digital empathy, cyberbullying, and basic consideration in our everyday society now than we ever did 20 years ago.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what Yoshida is describing is a slow, almost invisible, civilizing process.
A civilizing process. I like that phrasing.
The digital realm is still incredibly young in the grand scheme of human history. Early on, it was a frontier town without a sheriff. But the younger generations, the ones who are now the primary creators and drivers of online culture, they didn't grow up separating the real world from the digital world like older generations did.
The boundary doesn't exist for them.
No. They grew up in a blended reality where offline societal expectations naturally bleed into online behavior.
They are bringing the offline concept of manners into the digital room. Now, Yoshida is very pragmatic here. He makes it clear that this isn't a rapid fix or some utopian overnight transformation.
It's not suddenly a perfect, polite society.
Far from it. It is an incredibly slow, gradual adjustment. It's a blending process where the online world is slowly learning how to be slightly more careful, simply because the people building it and living in it are demanding a bit more care.
They're establishing norms.
Establishing norms, exactly.
That's a strangely hopeful way to look at it. We are watching the civic infrastructure of the internet being built in real time. It's clunky, it's full of friction, and it often fails. But the long-term trajectory is actually leaning toward consideration rather than pure chaos.
The rooms themselves are getting more polite.
The actual content in the communities forming around them are getting more structured, even if the doorways leading to them are still screaming for attention.
But that brings up a really fascinating tension. If the rooms are getting more mannered and the younger creators actually value this consideration, why are the doorways still so extreme?
Why haven't the thumbnails calmed down?
Exactly. Yoshida's answer to this is incredibly grounded. He understands exactly why the internet is structured this way. The creators who are making these quiet, reasonable, thoughtful videos are still using extreme, click-worthy thumbnails because the architectural structure of the internet demands it.
It's the only way to play the game.
If you don't use the loud doorway, no one ever finds the quiet room. It is a matter of digital survival.
You can't fault someone for playing by the rules of the game if they want their voice to be heard. In an attention economy where focus is the literal currency paying the bills, the loud doorway is a structural necessity.
And Yoshida doesn't fault them at all. He feels absolutely no need to criticize the creators doing this. He understands the game. It makes complete sense to him. But here is the crux of his personal philosophy and the way he maintains his own sanity in this environment.
His personal distance.
Right. He looks at that entire complex system, the extreme doorways, the shifted responsibility of speech, the relentless demands for attention, and he quietly states, I probably would not do it that way.
That is such a powerful, stabilizing statement. I probably would not do it that way.
It's not a harsh judgment.
He isn't condemning the creators or launching a crusade against the platforms. It's just him establishing a deliberate personal distance.
It's like he's standing on the bank of a rushing river. He understands exactly why the water is moving so fast. He understands why people are being swept along in the current, and he doesn't blame them for swimming.
But he's simply choosing to keep his own feet firmly planted on the dry bank.
He is maintaining his own internal compass while the atmosphere of the internet slowly shifts around him.
In an era where we are constantly pressured to either fully assimilate into every new digital trend or aggressively rebel against them, choosing a middle path of quiet non-participation is an act of profound self-preservation.
You don't have to join the current?
You can understand a system without sacrificing your own principles to it. You can observe the changing tides, especially as AI rapidly accelerates the current, without letting them pull you under. You don't have to optimize yourself just because the tools exist to do so.
So what does this all mean? If we take all of these pieces, Yoshida's observations about our quiet uneasiness, the structural realities of the web, and the slow adjustments we're making, what is the takeaway for you as you go about the rest of your day?
Let's bring it all together.
First, we have to recognize that we are actively caught in the middle of a slow, massive change. We're navigating an environment filled with extreme neon doorways that lead to perfectly calm, mundane rooms.
We are living in a space where the responsibility of speech has been outsourced to the crowd.
Driven by metrics and velocity rather than truth. Yet, at the exact same time, there is this underlying, persistent current of hope as younger creators slowly infuse offline manners and consideration into these digital spaces.
It's a paradox, and we are just sitting right in the messy middle of it.
We really are.
This raises an important question, especially when we bring this all back to the overarching theme of Yoshida's series, AI as a transitional phase. We've noted how humans are slowly trying to make the internet more careful and mannered, even while we're trapped by algorithms that demand extreme doorways and value outsourced reactions.
Right.
But as artificial intelligence becomes infinitely more sophisticated, it is learning from this exact architecture. So imagine a near future where AI systems are trained to perfectly mimic this dynamic.
Oh, wow.
An AI that can autonomously generate the most extreme, perfectly optimized doorway to mathematically hack human attention, which then leads to a perfectly polite, socially mannered, but completely synthetic room. All of it optimized to harvest our reactions and simulate human care.
That's a little terrifying.
If a machine learns to flawlessly execute the internet's new set of manners simply to push our buttons, will we eventually lose the ability to tell the difference between a genuine human attempting to share a vulnerable thought and a machine simply playing the structural game better than we ever could?
That is a heavy thought. But it's exactly the kind of unfinished question that Yoshida is encouraging us to just sit with.
We don't need the answer right now.
No, it's a massive shift that doesn't need an immediate panicked answer today, but it absolutely demands our ongoing awareness. As you head out into your day, the next time you open an app or browse a feed, I challenge you to look a little closer.
Notice the doorways screaming for your attention.
Pay attention to the quiet rooms they actually lead to. And above all, protect that quiet sense of uneasiness you feel when something doesn't quite add up.
Trust that feeling.
In a rapidly transitioning world, that hesitation just might be the most profoundly human thing you have left. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.